Hi everyone, welcome back to Jazz and Blues Ukulele with me, Matt Stead. In today's video we're going to look at a beautiful piece by Thelonious Monk, Round Midnight. Thelonious Monk was one of the founding musicians of the bebop movement, where things started to get a little bit more crazy and complex, and you'll really notice that with the unusual chord choices throughout this song. Later on, Thelonious Monk was a really important part in the development of hard bop, where musicians started going back to playing music really emotionally and away from the million notes per measure of bebop. This song was officially composed in 1944, although there are rumours that it goes back to the 1930s, and it's been covered by so many brilliant musicians, including beboppers like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, and then later on in a more sparse way by Miles Davis. And that's the kind of mood that we're going for with our arrangement of this. We want to keep things really sparse, really emotional, and really beautiful. One of the things that Thelonious Monk was really famous for was his esoteric use of chords. Chords that give a slightly discordant feel and quite an exotic feel. He used them almost in a sense of coloration rather than your standard structural movement. What do I mean by coloration? Well, rather than the traditional horizontal movement of chords where every chord follows into another, a kind of formulaic structure, things like 1, 6, 2, 5 progressions and backwards around the circle of fifths. Rather than those kind of progressions, he uses a lot of chromaticism, so chords that are only half a step away from the chord that preceded or followed it. And also he used chords as coloration. He would take an exotic chord that wouldn't fit in a normal progression and he would use it even if it sounded slightly discordant at that particular moment. It's one of the things that many people find challenging when listening to modern jazz, but for many people it's like ear candy. Those delicious chords really stand out. And you'll notice at this point in jazz there's the introduction of more and more dissonance, notes and chords out of key, the ones that kind of challenge your ears, and that's really interesting. And that really peaked in the 1960s with free jazz, which was almost like anything goes. And you can even think about the whole history of jazz as a playoff between consonance and dissonance. If you think of early jazz, we have those really straightforward chord progressions and notes that really strictly stay within the key. And then that gradually becomes more and more dissonant over time with more sophisticated Broadway jazz. And then the introduction of more rebellious jazz with things like bebop. Modern jazz, and then free jazz later on. This might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but actually I mean this in an encouraging way. Try not to get too bogged down in the harmonic structure in some of these bebop and hard bop pieces because it's so complex. Really, you almost need a degree in musicology to understand some of this stuff. And there are entire university courses dedicated to the understanding of these progressions. But at the same time, don't be intimidated by them. Remember that even the most sophisticated, hard-sounding jazz chord will only be 4 notes at most on our ukulele. We've got 4 strings, so we can only have 4 notes. So how hard can they be, right? I'll make them as simple and easy as possible for you. And I've kept this piece relatively sparse because the whole feel of this has that kind of chilled out midnight vibe, right? So we want to keep that going. So it's a relatively sparse arrangement. In terms of technique, we're mostly going to play everything with our thumb today. So melody notes and chords, with some exceptions where I want to add an almost like 3-dimensional feel to the piece at certain moments where we will go to nail strums rather than thumb strums to add some dynamism. To get that nice warmth from the tone, it's really important that we do certain things physically to make these chords really ring out. Notice that my thumb is held relatively straight, and this is really key. I don't bend it like this, which would create quite a harsh, kind of quite a tinny harsh sound and is quite hard to control. It's actually straightened out. I'm also going to strum most of these chords using the middle part of my thumbnail. Now, don't panic if you don't have a thumbnail. You can use the middle part of the pad of your thumb. That'll be absolutely fine as well. The important thing is not to use the side of the thumb because you're likely to catch a nail and you get really twangy notes and you'll get caught up in the strings. So if I rotate this way, notice that I'm going to move my hand up so that I have that nice arch on my arm and my thumb is straight and the middle part of my thumb is going to strum down. Also notice that when I strum chords, such as the first one, that I'm dragging my whole arm down from the elbow and I'm strumming roughly where the body of the ukulele meets the neck, like so. This song is in the key of F minor. You can tell that by looking at the treble clef. We've got those 4 flats. There are 4 flats in the key of F minor. So the 1 chord, the chord that starts us off in the song, is the 1 chord, an F minor. And what we do is we take that D minor shape and we just move it up the fretboard. So D minor, D sharp minor, E minor, F minor. Now the first melody note that we want to play is this A flat note, the 4th fret of the E string. So when we play that F minor, we're going to drag our thumb over the top 3 strings physically, G, C and E, just like I showed you a moment ago. And then we're going to dig in. Make sure you don't play the A string, but rest your thumb on it after you've played the chord. That way we hear an F minor chord with that lovely A flat note really standing out like so. Fantastic. where we have a quick series of melody notes, such as the semiquavers that follow that chord, rather than having to move that elbow up and down, which is going to be too much work, we're just going to make the movement using our thumb. But we're still going to use the middle part of that thumb to pick downwards. So after we've strummed that first chord using movement from the elbow, we can use our thumb movement to quickly play these notes, and then finish with another downward motion on the next chord. Notice the cool thing about playing the melody notes up here in this part of the fretboard, it means that we can mostly keep this chord shape down. As we hit the first two notes, we just lift off our third finger, and as we hit the next two, we lift off our second finger, and then we can complete that phrase with the chord coming down. Now, if you're playing low G, those notes that you play on the G string you can replace with the third fret of the E string for the G and the third fret of the A string for the C. So you could play off 5 on the C string, and then third fret of the E string and third fret of the A string and back to the chord. But obviously if you are playing high G, it means that we have a really nice economy of movement. We hardly have to move these fingers at all, and that's what we're looking for. So our opening phrase will sound like this. 3, 4. Then as I go into the next phrase, I can come out of that chord and hit the open C. I'm going to bar the first fret for this next chord because it makes the next following bit easier. I'm going to strum down with my thumb over the top 3 strings physically, and then I'm going to pick the E string for the F note that follows. We're not going to sweat the theory too much, but basically this opening section is a 1, 6, 4, 5, where the 5 chord, which would normally be a C7, has been swapped out for a diminished chord, which is only 1 note different. Now, as I say, we're not going to sweat the theory too much, but let's have a look at these next 2 chords. Now, I like to play these almost as like a call and response part, and that's what Thelonious Monk does when he plays it in his version. So when we hit these next 2 chords, the B flat minor 9 and the E diminished 7th, we're actually going to strum using our nails, what we call a nail brush. We're actually going to pass all 3 or 4 of our nails. I don't have a nail on my forefinger because of the way I sometimes anchor it on the soundboard. But we're going to pass all of those nails lightly over the strings, and we're going to make the strum really, really light. The reason I got you to play the preceding chord using a bar on the first fret is what we can do is keep that bar down and then take your third finger and put it on the 3rd fret of the G string, and your little finger, your pinky, on the 3rd fret of the A string, and then just very lightly with your nails strum down. And then we can go to this simple diminished 7th chord, 0, 1, 0, 1. And notice by using my nails, I get quite a brittle, light sounding chord. And that is like a call and response to the first phrase. Have a listen to this. Do you hear that at the end? It's like a little echo. So we have the strength of the main melody and then a little call and response echo following it. That B flat minor 9 is particularly tricky, and this is a really important point, and you can use this for the whole of the rest of the song and many other arrangements as well. If you find that chord too tricky with those 2 fingers on the outside 2 strings of the 3rd fret and the bar, what you can do is simplify it by just not playing the note that's on the G string, this B flat note up here at the 3rd fret. So in effect, you can just do a bar of the bottom 3 strings physically of the 1st fret, and then your little finger or your 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, like so. Now we're still going to do that nail brush to get that real nice lightness, but try not to touch the G string as you do it, like so. Now it just gives you an easier option. If you can do the full chord, it's nice to do it because you get the complexity of all of those notes. But if you struggle, just try playing the bottom 3 strings, and you can apply that to any of these difficult chords up and down the fretboard. And if you think, well, that's a bit of a cop-out, There are many, many brilliant players, some of the most famous players in the world that do this, and on tricky chords they'll only play 3 of the strings, and you'll notice it on many arrangements as well. So if you struggle, use the 3 strings. If you can do the 4-string version, brilliant. So let's try that opening phrase after 3, 4. 3, 4. Brilliant. Remember with all this, if that's super tricky at the moment, just go at your own pace. You don't have to play at that tempo for now, and then gradually increase the tempo as you get that confidence. So for that D half diminished, the D minor 7 flat 5, we're going to play it like so, with our index finger barring the 1st fret, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the C string. We're going to drag down. Then for the next part, we're going to use our thumb to pick out the melody notes, remember? Then we're going to use our little finger to reach up to the 4th fret of the E string. Keep the rest of your shape down and just drag down the top 3 strings with your thumb, like so. Then we're going to move that 3rd finger down to the 3rd fret of the A string for this C note. Okay. So therefore we're staying in this bar shape for the first few notes, like so. Then we can come out of that chord to hit this 6th fret up here for this E flat note. Now that's too tricky to stay in the chord and reach up. It would be just about doable, but because we're changing chords, we're going to hit that note with our little finger, 6th fret of the A string. Then what I want you to do is just take that little finger back a fret to the 5th fret. And then for the rest of this chord, which looks really awkward, just build a D minor shape over the top. Okay, so little fingers on the 5th fret of the A string, and then we literally just build a D minor shape on frets 4 and 5 over the top for this lovely D minor half diminished chord. Isn't that lovely? One of those colourful chords that Thelonious Monk used, which I talked about. And when you see it written out as a tab, you think, how on earth can I put my finger in that shape? But if you think about it, little finger on the 5th, D minor shape, it's not so bad. So let's put that measure together really slowly this time after 3, 4. 3, 4. Little finger, 3rd finger, little finger at 6, drag back, and that lovely chord on top. Now this next phrase, which starts with the note at the end of measure 3, this F note, 5th fret of the C string, it's part of the melody, round midnights, midnights. But to keep that lovely textured corner response going, I like to use nail brushes for all of the chords in measure 4. Again, tough chords here, so let me show you the 4-finger version, but again, feel free to simplify them by leaving the note off the G string and just playing the C, E and A strings. But to do the full chords, for the D flat minor 7, just put 2 fingers at the 1st fret on the G and C strings, and then your 3rd finger or your pinky on the 2nd fret of the A string. Isn't that lovely? A real spicy chord. Then we've got an F sharp 7, which would normally look like this, just an F sharp moved upwards. But the trouble is, we need this B flat note here to be the last note that we hear. So we've altered this chord. So we put our 1st finger down here. Then we put our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the E string. Our 3rd finger goes up on the G string at the 3rd fret. And then our 4th finger comes down here on the 4th fret of the C string, like so. And then for the next chord, we can either flatten out using just your ring finger across the G, C and E strings, like so. Or you can use 3 fingers, like so. And then finally, just a bog standard F7, an easier chord at the end. And remember all of those with nail brushes, so we get this nice lightness, like so. Again, don't sweat the theory too much, but if you look at measure number 5, if you think of that B flat chord as the 1 chord, the chords on measure 4 are basically a 2, 5, 1 into that B flat, with the first 2 chords in that measure being half a step up. So it's a little bit of chromatic movement. Again, don't worry too much about the chords, just really appreciate how beautiful they sound. For that B flat minor 7 chord on measure 5, what we're going to do is we're going to bar the whole of the 6th fret, and then we're going to reach up with our 3rd finger to the 8th fret of the C string. So we drag our thumb down for the chord, our finger's in the right place for the 6th fret of the E string. For the 9th fret, use your little finger, take it down to the 8th fret of the A string, and then up to the 11th fret. At this point you can move out of the chord because we're about to transition into another one. Then for the E flat 7, just move your little finger back from the 11th to the 10th fret and build what looks like a G7 shape on the C, E and A strings like so. Index finger comes up here onto the 8th fret of the G string and you can strum that whole thing out. Now to get this one to sound clean, you're going to have to use the very tips of those fingers. Keep them standing up nice and straight. Thumb on the back so we have that nice circle, press relatively firmly and experiment with moving those fingers about until you can get a clear chord. Again, if you want a simplified one, just do that G7 shape on the bottom 3 strings and miss out the note on the G string to make that much easier. So measure 5 really slowly will sound like this. 3, 4. Change into that E flat 7 chord. Now our finger's in the right place for this note at the 9th fret of the E string. Then just bar the 8th fret, 3rd finger on the 10th fret, and we're just going to strum down the top 3 strings for this F minor. Okay, lovely. Again, you might need to experiment with finger placement to get that to ring clear. These next 2 chords are proper spicy Thelonious Monk chords. They're not too difficult once you get the hang of the shape and they're really fun. Take your index finger and place it on the 9th fret of the G string. 2nd finger covers the middle 2 strings, C and E strings, at the 10th fret. And then your 3rd finger comes down here and covers just the 11th fret of the A string. So it looks like almost like 3 bars in a row, but this finger is only really touching the G string, doesn't need to press the others. This one is really putting most pressure on the middle 2 strings. If it hits the A string, doesn't matter because this one cancels it out here. I'm going to do a really nice light nail brush down on this chord. Isn't that great? A B flat 7 flat 5. And then for the next chord, all we're going to do is we're going to keep that exact shape down and we're going to drag it back to 3, 4 and 5. Isn't that cool? So we hit it once up here at the 9th fret and then once back here at the 3rd fret. Yeah, lovely. Next up we have another of these chromatic runs. This just means several chords in a row that are descending notes chromatically. That just means half a step down. So we have a type of D chord, a D half diminished. A type of D flat chord, which is half a step back. We've got a D flat 7 flat 5. Then a type of C chord, which is a half step below again. And we've got a C7 flat 9, a really lovely chromatic movement. As long as you get your fingers in the right place for this first chord, the ones that follow are relatively simple. So, 1st finger on the 1st fret of the G string, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the C string, and then your little finger here on the 4th fret of the E string, like so. That gives you the D minor 7 flat 5, otherwise known as a D half diminished. Then what we do is I like to take my index finger down to the 1st fret, and I just bring my little finger back to the 3rd fret of the E string, like so, for this really beautiful D flat 7 flat 5 chord. We hit 2 of those, drop down here to play this F note, 1st fret of the E string, move it back up for the first part of this C7 flat 9, and then little finger or 3rd finger drops down for the C note. Now with the timing, that sounds something like this. Notice on that last chord that I allow the chord to ring out as I hit the C note. Again, it creates a nice kind of spicy discordant sounding chord. So if we put that together, 2, 3. Fantastic. This song's in AABA format. You can think of that as verse, verse, bridge, verse, AABA. So here we repeat the A section, and the second time we ignore the first repeat and we do the second repeat. Let's play through the first A section really super slowly. Now, if you're not able to play it at this tempo yet, don't sweat it. This is a really tough piece and you might need to take your time. But just so you can hear how it works, let's go through that A section as if we're repeating it. So from the top, 3, 4. Bar that first fret. Up to 6. Now brush these next 4. Take your time. Next line up to 6 and 8. Up to 11 and back to the 10. Bar, and then our 3-part bars. Lovely. And now this time we'll do the second repeat, which is very similar. We've got that 1, 2 again up here, first fret, second fret. Then our little finger on the 4th fret for the E string. Now this time we move a little bit more quickly into the D flat 7 flat 5 like so. So straight away. Then we go to this unusual 001 C7 sus4 chord. Now at the next chord, this is really interesting. We have an F6 chord, but I'm just playing it as a single note like so. Now this is really interesting. Sometimes players will play that as an F minor. That will sound like this if I put the whole of that repeat together. It has a kind of almost a sadness to it at the end. Played as an F major 6, it will sound like this. That little bit lighter. Now I like to be really ambiguous purposefully, so actually I just finish on the F note. So it could be thought of either as a major or a minor chord. It's ambiguous, which is really nice. Plus it keeps it super sparse. Isn't that lovely? I really like that. Quite unusual, but really pretty. Then we go to the B section, and you may be pleased to know that the chords in this one are a little bit simpler, and I'm keeping them nice and sparse for that laid back kind of moody feel to the piece, which is lovely. Notice we've got these chromatic movements again. We're going from a type of D chord to a type of D flat chord to a type of C chord. So that's going backwards chromatically from D to D flat to C, a really common thing to do in Thelonious Monk's music. Once you get your fingers in the right place for the first chord, the rest follows on really neatly and simply. So we have another of those D minor 7 flat 5s. So first fret for the G string, second fret for the C string, little finger over here on the 4th fret of the E string, and just strum the top 3 strings physically. Then just replace that little finger with your 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the E string. Allow that G note to ring out, and then we can take everything off and head back for this F note here. Okay, so like so. Then we go up to this lovely C7 flat 5 chord, just 5-4-0 for this one, really simple. You can either use your first 2 fingers or your second 2 fingers for this one, and we strum the top 3 strings. Take away your second finger, or whichever finger is on the C string, and just strum the top 3. Isn't that lovely? So if I put those 2 measures together, Really simple yet really effective, right? Then we carry on in the same vein. We've got another one of those D minor 7 flat 5s with the stretchy out little finger. Back to 3. And this time we just play the same chord twice. Really simple, right? Let's put those 4 measures together, the start of the B section. 2, 3, 4. Hang on. Beautiful, then we do it again. This time, same chord twice. Fantastic. Then we go to a lovely, beautiful series of chords, starting with a B flat minor 7. Just bar the whole of the 1st fret, little finger on the 4th fret of the A string. I like to then take my little finger back to the C note, 3rd fret of the A string, and just put these 2 fingers down here for this G minor 7 with the high C added. Then just simply resolve that to a C7 in the corner. Okay, now we have 2 beats on the 1st chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, nice and simple. So measure 15, 3, 4. Yeah, good. Then we've got another D minor 7 flat 5. You'll be an expert on these by the end of this song. 1, 2, 4 again, little finger on the 4th fret of the E string. And then you can leave your 2nd finger where it is and just use your 3rd finger for this G note here, creating this unusual partial G7 chord, 0, 2, 3. Okay. So notice we pivot on that 2nd finger. Nice. Then we have a massive harmonic leap. We're leaping right up the fretboard, or in Monk's case, up the keyboard. And we have an E flat 9 followed by a D flat 9. Now again, these chords seem really tricky when you look at them on the tablature, but if you do them bit by bit, they're not too bad. Let me show you. So the E flat 9, what I want you to do is take a normal G7 shape, move it up to the top 3 strings. So instead of here, we're going to play it here. Then take that shape all the way up to 9 and 10. Okay, up here, look for your dots, 9 and 10. So we've got a G7 shape on the top 3 strings of 9 and 10. Well, all you need to do to finish that chord off is squeeze your little finger on the 10th fret of the A string. Okay, looks really intimidating, and when you see it like that, it looks really, really tricky. But if you think just G7 shape moved up, and then we add our little finger, it's not so bad. Again, get right up on those fingertips to try and get as much clarity in that chord as possible. If you're playing this on a soprano or a concert and you're running out of room, try the 3-finger version. So ignore the note on the G string and we can just use 3 fingers like so. Likewise, the D flat 9, if we think about shapes, it's not so bad again. What we're going to do this time, instead of a G7 shape, we're going to take a normal G shape, G major shape. We're going to play that on the top 3 strings, so G, C and E strings. And we're going to take that up to frets 4 and 5, like so. So a normal G shape, moved up to the top 3 strings and moved up to frets 4 and 5. Then this time, our pinky, our little finger, is going to come down here on the 6th fret, like so. You can also do this by barring the 4th fret, 2nd finger on the 5th fret C string and 3rd finger on the 6th fret of the A string. But I love the fact that you can just think of it as a shape moved up and then we just pop our pinky down. So again, 2 really tricky chords, but if you think of them as shapes first and then get those in first, you'll be able to play them really nicely. And each one is 2 beats or half a measure, so you have plenty of time on those 2 chords. Measure 18 is basically a repeat of measure 15. We have this lovely B flat minor 7th chord with this little finger down here on the 4th fret of the A string. Pull it back into the minor shape. And then this time, just keep your little finger where it is. And we hit this C chord at the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Fantastic. Now that's the whole of the B section done. Let's try putting that together really slowly. Again, I count 3, 4, but if you're not ready to play it yet, just have a listen so you can hear how it goes. If you feel up to it, have a play along with me. So I'm going to go from the double bar lines. This is measure 11. 3, 4. Hold it. Up to 4 and 5. Same again this time. The same chord up at 4 and 5 twice. Measure 15, bar that first fret and stretch. Pull back into that first chord again. Good. Then think G7 shape, little finger added. Pull back to 4 and 5 and 6. And we repeat again that B flat minor 7. And a C at the end. Yeah, fantastic. Well done, guys. Loads to think about again, so really take your time with that. Think about chord shapes and positioning, and if you really struggle with those tougher chords, just play the C, E and A strings, ignore the notes on the G string, just to simplify it and make it a little bit easier. So that's basically it, that's the whole song, because then we just repeat the A section all over again. Notice right at the end of the song, I've kept it ambiguous again. We've got a single F note, and I really love that. How sparse is that? We finish with just a single note. I think it sounds really great. And of course it keeps that ambiguity. Is it an F major chord or an F minor chord? Of course, what you could do is experiment with both. Because we want this F note to really ring out when we finish playing the last chord, if you're doing an F minor version, you don't need to worry about putting your little finger here on this C note. We just play 1, 0, 1 like so. If you want to try playing an F6 chord, that would normally look like this, like a D minor with this little finger added here. It's the same shape as a D minor 7. Same thing, because we want that F note to ring out, we can do away with this finger and just strum the top 3 like so. Has a more upbeat nature, doesn't it? Of course, you could go for a normal F major at the end, 2, 0, 1. And each one will have a slightly different sound. Have a listen. I'll do the penultimate 2 measures and you can see which you like best. So, with just the F note. Now, with an F minor chord. Really melancholy, isn't it, with that minor chord? Let's try it with an F6. Has that sense of optimism, doesn't it? Really interesting. So experiment and see which you prefer. The other thing to notice is that we have a rich, short for ritandando. That means we're going to slow down on the penultimate measure. I also like to soften up as well to have a sort of decrescendo in this penultimate measure. So it would normally sound like this played without the rit. But if we slow down, it has a feel of just like gradually coming to a halt. Isn't that lovely? It really works with that moodiness. So have a little experiment with that, slowing down gradually as you go through that measure. And finally, that wiggly line right at the end on that F note, that's just a vibrato. Vibrato is where we just wiggle that finger, which creates a slight warble in the note. Singers often do it, don't they? Creates a nice warble, and it also sustains the note slightly. For a nice vibrato, take your thumb off the back of the ukulele. Imagine this finger here in the middle of the fret has grown roots into the fretboard. And what we're going to do is we're going to wiggle your whole arm, but imagine your first finger is glued in place. So your finger isn't sliding backwards and forwards, it's staying in the same place, but the wobble comes from your hand and your arm. There. And we get that nice bit of sustain and vibrato at the end. So that will sound something like this. just let it naturally decay. Fantastic. And that's it, you've done it. So remember, we've got that A format. So the first A section twice, then a nice B section, a bridge, and then we repeat the A section at the end with that lovely ritandando. This is a really tricky piece. This is much tougher than anything else we've done in the jazz and blues course. But I wanted to keep a nice chronology of our jazz and blues. But don't worry, we'll do something much more simple in the next lesson. But think of this as a challenge. Take it really slowly. Even if you can't play the whole thing yet, just learning about adding dynamics in by varying thumb strums and nail brushes, that's a fantastic thing. Even if you've just learned a few new jazz chords, that's absolutely brilliant. All of these little things really help your playing in the long run. And of course, take your time. Take it measure by measure. Go really way below tempo and feel free to simplify those chords to just the notes on the C, E and A strings as well. And most importantly, just really enjoy it. I love the sound of these sophisticated jazz chords on our ukulele. And remember, don't be intimidated by the fancy names. We can only play 4 notes at the most on our ukulele, so they can't be any more scary than normal chords, right? And remember, if you think of them as shapes, you'll be absolutely fine. I'll see you in another jazz and blues lesson very soon. Take care, guys, and you can